Master and Commander is a 2003 war drama starring Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany. Based on the book of the same name, the film takes place in the midst of the Napoleonic Wars. Russell Crowe plays Jack Aubrey, an English captain who pursues a French warship off the coast of South America. Paul Bettany plays Stephen Maturin, the ship's surgeon, a scientist, and Aubrey's close friend and confidant. Visually spectacular, the film distinguishes itself through its minimalistic storytelling. While other films are heavy in exposition, Master and Commander puts an emphasis on light dialogue and a visual narrative. With sparse lines spoken between the characters, much of the plot and atmosphere are built through the visuals of the film. The film's director, Peter Weir, known for his former film The Truman Show, deeply immerses us in what life was like on an early 19th century ship. With the crew, we're called to attention, run to our stations, and engage in the work involved in maintaining the ship. We see the crew during combat and military exercises, as well as during downtime and rest. The film immerses us in the period just after the Battle of Trafalgar. Aubrey explains what it was like to meet Horatio Nelson, the British admiral who defeated Napoleon at sea. This victory ensured the British Isles would go uninvaded by the French, and that the British would go on to rule the world's oceans for the next century. Despite Napoleon's defeat, the revolutionary French state continued to defy Britain at sea. It was quick to incorporate new military technologies into its navy to attempt to contest the naval superiority of the British. We see this in the construction of the elite French ship that is the focus of the film, the Acheron. A foe of Aubrey's ship, the Surprise, the film opens with the Acheron ironically succeeding in a surprise attack against him. Aubrey spends the rest of the film seething, trying to hunt the Acheron to avenge his defeat. An aesthetic film, despite its sparse dialogue, Master and Commander communicate several powerful themes. It ruminates on existential questions and tries to impart its lessons. Let's unpack these and try to understand the 3 life lessons taught to us by Master and Commander. Number 1. Be their commander, not their friend. Master and Commander shows the hierarchy and discipline of a 19th century British ship. The film is mainly shown from the perspective of Aubrey, who's an effective captain and commander. However, the film also cuts and shows us the narrative of a struggling officer, the midshipman Holland. One of the young officers on the Surprise given a promotion, Holland is put in charge of a group of sailors. Yet he finds himself unprepared for this role. Despite being learned and qualified for the job, he's intimidated that he's put in charge of older crew members. So, he tries to become familiar with them and get to know them. He tries to befriend his subordinates, but this leads to a new problem. Instead of liking him and respecting him, his efforts to treat the sailors as equals alienates them and causes them to resent him. In addition, the crew members become superstitious, and when bad luck begins to accumulate on the ship, they start to blame it on him. Already experiencing some amount of mental health challenges, their blame increases the depression he feels. Here you can imagine what it must have been like to be on a ship at sea. You're stuck with a fixed group of people in a limited space, and if you don't get along with them, then it must have been pretty miserable. Aubrey meets with Holland and advises him. He tells him the men will respect him, but he has to assert himself and change the way he relates to them. They want him to be their commander, not their friend. When they're fighting the French, they want someone they can have confidence in to lead them, not someone who treats them like an equal. Aubrey understands human nature and understands that different kinds of relationship exist. There are friendships, romances, and power-based relationships. Aubrey knows that if the crew respects Holland, then he will be able to ingratiate himself with them later and get them to like him. But they need to respect him first before he can do this. One of the tragedies of the film is Holland's failure to become a commander. On one evening, he speaks to a young crewmate and thanks him for the kindness he gave to him, before grabbing a cannonball and jumping overboard, having made up his mind to commit suicide. While Aubrey gives Holm good advice, there's a tragedy to this junior officer not being able to rise to the challenge given to him and choosing to take his own life. This lesson teaches us that there are more types of relationship in life than friendship, and we have to adapt to this. 2. Friends enrich one's life. In the film, Aubrey becomes obsessed with hunting a French ship called the Acheron. The French surprise Aubrey at the start of the film, which embarrasses him and motivates him to get revenge. Though the Acheron is a superior, more advanced ship, Aubrey believes that the superior seamanship and experience of his crew means that he can beat the French in combat, as long as he can fight them on his terms. Aubrey is motivated by a desire to protect the British civilians in the East, to serve his country in the Napoleonic Wars, and to show his valor in battle. As the plot proceeds, Aubrey's hunt for the Acheron turns into a fixation, overcoming all his interests as he becomes obsessed, like Ahab in his quest for Moby Dick. The one thing that grounds the captain is his friendship with Stephen Maturin, the ship's surgeon. Learned and emotionally intelligent, Maturin tries to give his friend perspective. But as Aubrey becomes more obsessed, their relationship comes under strain. Maturin has an interest in science similar to Charles Darwin, and as they sail around South America hunting the Acheron, he requests the ship make a stop on the Galapagos so he can hold a scientific survey. Aubrey says he will, yet after catching wind of the Acheron breaks his promise and resumes his obsessive hunt once again for the French ship. This disappoints Maturin, who feels they are hunting a phantom. Aubrey seems to lose his balance, neglects his friendship, and seems to willingly lose his friend. Yet when things seem their worst, the character surprises us and decides to stop in the Galapagos. In an expedition reminiscent of that of the Beagle, Maturin and his young apprentice traverse the island in search of scientific specimens. They collect samples of plants and animals and start making sketches they can donate to the scientific society back in England. Fortune intervenes for Aubrey, however, and while exploring on the far side of the island, Maturin spies the French ship, which has secretly taken harbor there for repairs. Deciding his captain's ambition is worth more to him than science, Maturin abandons his specimens and rushes back to the surprise, telling Aubrey that the Acheron was in their reach. There's a lot of irony here. If Aubrey had abandoned his friend, they would have sailed right past the Galapagos searching for the French. But by taking time for leisure and supporting Maturin, fortune intervened in Aubrey's favor. This tale shows us how friends help us to fulfill our ambitions, as well as emotionally and intellectually fulfilling us. 3. Take time for the beautiful. Master and Commander focuses on the relationship between two characters, Aubrey and Maturin. While the main plot focuses on the hunt for the French ship, the film digresses frequently to show the two's conversations and exchanges. One theme of the film is the question of what one should dedicate oneself to in life. Should one focus only on industry and work, like the hunt for the Acheron, or should one value idleness and the cultivation of the aesthetic instead? The film seems to argue a paradox, that often the greatest discoveries, like the scientific ones of Maturin that mimic Darwin, are a result of individuals taking time for idleness. This seems to argue that leisure time is actually productive, and that our downtime is often spent on enterprises that bring us a lot of benefit. The motif of music in the film is another example of this. Aubrey and Maturin play the violin and cello together. Their music demonstrates several things. First, like the Indian god of the dance, their music shows the harmony of the universe, despite its occurring through suffering, loss, and war. The two continue playing their duets, even when Aubrey becomes obsessed by his pursuit of the Acheron in the midst of the Napoleonic Wars. Their music persists through all the vicissitudes of their relationship. Whether they are on good terms or having fallen out, the music of the two prevails, showing artistically how relationships rise and fall as a part of the secret harmony of the universe. The choice of the two instruments, the violin and cello, some of the most expressive, emphasizes the humanity of Aubrey and Maturin, and expresses the travails each has been through. Their music also shows that individuals can bond in a deeper way than just conversation, in a way that is existential. Their music encourages us to cultivate and appreciate the beautiful, and to understand that beauty exists in the world as a real thing, as a Platonic idea. Conclusion. With his ambition to capture the Acheron having driven him through the whole film, Aubrey at last gets his battle and defeats the superior French ship. He then parleys with the French captain, accepting his sword in victory. This is a great emotional conclusion for the viewer, after we watched Aubrey struggle and obsess the whole film, and we find he was right, in that he was actually the superior seaman, and the Acheron merely surprised him at the start of the film. The film ends, though, with an interesting reversal. We learn that it was a deception, that the French captain lied to him, hid his identity, and fled back to his ship in disguise. Learning this, Aubrey rouses himself and swiftly resumes his duty, embarking quickly to pursue the French ship. With the Acheron peeling off just over the horizon, Aubrey goes after the French. This symbolically seems to represent a final theme, that there is always the quest for the pearl. That while in victory we can rest on our laurels, there is always the pearl of great price, the object of our ambition, of our enterprise, that we can pursue.